Hello and welcome to Angry Andy Reviews, and this is a very quick review for The Rings of Power, Season 2, Episode 4.
Angry Andy.
Angry Andy Reviews.
Angry Andy. Angry Andy.
Angry Andy Reviews.
Angry Andy.
Angry Andy Reviews.
Angry Andy.
Angry Andy Reviews. Angry Andy Reviews.
Don't make me destroy you.
So, The Rings of Power. Yes, I'm still watching because I like punishing myself. And yes, I should stop watching, but the problem is I'm that invested in the Tolkien world that I can't help myself, and I will continue to watch it because of some vain hope that something good will come from all this. Much in the same way with any Star Wars product that's come out over the last few years. Some of it I've loved, some of it I've not. It is what it is, but it's that vain hope, that investment that I've put in, as you can see on the wall, that drives me every single time something new comes out. It's a problem. It's the sunk cost fallacy. Look it up. That's what it is. And that is what I have with this show, with The Rings of Power. I've invested that much into the world over the years that I can't simply not engage with it. So don't come at me and tell me just stop watching, because that's not how it works when you're a fan, when you love the worlds that are being put on screen. You have to engage with it, you have to view it, you have to deal with it. And I am trying to deal with this series, but I am struggling beyond measure. I've come to a discovery, especially with this episode of Rings of Power, episode 4 from season 2, where they introduce Tom Bombadil, and for the rest of the show just have everybody walking through forests or deserts, only to come up against some mediocre challenge at the end, including Galadriel facing off an entire legion of orcs all by herself in what is a very cringy battle scene where the choreography is just dreadful. It's absolutely dreadful. God almighty. The stunt people are just stood there in circles doing nothing. She just takes them out. Wow, that's not entertaining. It's not exciting. What are you doing? Give us some challenge, for God's sake. But I've discovered with this show that a lot of the writing seems to be bent around pure nostalgia. There are literal lines of dialogue that are constantly lifted from the movies, from the books, and there is no greater example than with Tom Bombadil in this episode. Everything he does, everything he says is lifted from the Fellowship of the Ring when he's talking to Sam and Frodo. And it's the same here. We have snippets lifted from that book. We have a sequence where this unknown wizard, who's either Gandalf or Saruman at this point, who knows, nobody really knows, but we do know, is swallowed by a tree, and it's exactly taken from the Fellowship of the Ring as well. There is a passage in the Fellowship of the Ring where the same thing happens. And we're giving it here at discount level. It comes, it goes, there's not really much made of it. And Tom Bombadil himself is posited as some kind of Yoda figure in this point. He gives this wizard advice, he gives him tutorials, he tells him about the world. He's essentially the exposition giver in this episode to try and utter some kind of reaction from him to make him, discover how to use magic. All right, okay, fine. But for me, the fundamental basics of this show are not really there. It's not hard to lift dialogue from another medium, a much better show or movie, to try and beef up your own lacking writing. And this show is fundamentally lacking in writing, and couple that with just some poorly forgettable characters and performances that just don't really reach. And I put that purely down to the writing itself. Don't get me wrong, I've said it time and time again. I think the episodes are beautiful in the way they look. In this episode we get Ents that look fantastic, if a bit out of place. There is, spoiler alert, the Entwives appear, something that was alluded to in Tolkien, and then we got, a sense of the loss of that in the Two Towers. And in this, we also get Barrow-Weiss, that again, they're edited for the purpose of the show. Right, fine, whatever. I mean, they pop up in a strange place for a start, but they're here, and it's interesting to see. It's interesting to see these extra dimensions being put into the show. And like I said, it does look beautiful, but unfortunately for me, the characters themselves, the story itself, is really, really lacking. It's lacking for me, because I just don't believe any of the characters. I don't feel like I'm invested in any of these characters, purely because they're just sprouting nonsense at every single turn. There's interpolitical machinations between them. You know, oh, I don't like the way you're doing this. I don't agree with you, Elrond. I don't agree with you, Galadriel. And none of it's interesting. None of it's engaging. It's simple. It's basic. It's there to create some kind of mad tension that doesn't exist. And with this episode, where a lot of the times the characters are walking together and dealing with scenarios, the hilarious scenario that they come across is Galadriel and a team of elves, including Elrond, decide to charge their way to Eregion, but instead of using horses, which they've used before, they decide to run the entire journey. Why? Because it's a great callback to the Fellowship of the Ring, when Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli, the Two Towers, when they were chasing the Uruk-hai across the fields. Lest we forget that they had no horses at that point, so that's why they were running. For fuck's sake. Stop trying to do something. Stop trying to mirror and recreate great sequences from the films just for this show, just to gain a reaction. And that's all this show ever is. It's using past stuff to gain a reaction from its audience, and some people lap it up. We do that with Marvel movies, we do that with Star Wars. We see a bit of nostalgia and we fucking lap it up, don't we? I'm guilty of it. I have been guilty of it. Of lapping up good nostalgia, but at the same time, you have to have good writing to go with it. You have to have interesting characters to go with it. You have to have a solid story to go with it. You can't just have surface visuals and callbacks to try and posit what is supposed to be a good show. Not when you've spent as much money as you have done on this show. Now, Tom Bombadil aside, it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. It's not groundbreaking or anything. It's interesting to see Tom Bombadil, even though he is supposed to be, this weird hermit fellow in the middle of the forest, a sort of spirit that is unevolved, unconnected to the rest of the world, uninvolved, I was meant to say. But here it's weird. He almost feels like, a knockoff version of it. We have to put him in. We have to put him in here, and then, we're not going to craft interesting dialogue, new dialogue for him. We'll just use what he's already said previously in the books. It's a shame. It's a real shame that it doesn't feel any more powerful, any more. I don't know how to describe it, because I'm literally lost for words at a lot of points in this show. In this episode specifically, the two Harfoots, they discover a village, and there's an interesting conundrum there with them when they discover this village, when they discover these other Harfoots themselves. I can't remember what they call, Store, I think it is. And there's this whole story about how they separated to try and go their opposite ways. One band wanted to go and find, green hills to build holes and live in, and this other half decided to stay where they were in the hopes that they would come back and get them. And it's interesting to see from that perspective how communities fall apart and how other communities are created. But is it really interesting in the grand scope of this series? Is this really what we want to see? We're here watching a series about Sauron creating the rings of power, of Sauron gathering forces, of Sauron, consolidating power through the use of trinkets. Do we really want to see a story really about the Harfoots finding their true home? No, not really. Not really. The thing about Lord of the Rings, it was the surprise that so much power, so much strength could come from so small a thing. And that means, in essence, the hobbits themselves. The strength that the hobbits show in The Lord of the Rings, in The Hobbit itself. That's where, that comes from. That's where this surprise comes from. This interesting story comes from. I don't need to know the entire history, the back history of the Hobbits, which is possibly where this is going. They all go and settle together in Hobbiton. Oh my word, are we doing that? Are we really doing an origin story for the Hobbits? I sincerely hope not, but we'll have to see, won't we? There are a lot of threads that are just completely uninteresting. The whole issue with Isildur and this woman they find that goes along with them, who's betrayed them. Oh my word, who cares at this point? It's not interesting. Fundamentally, it's not interesting. This episode, we don't spend any time in Numenor, and I completely forgot again that there's a whole side story with Numenor. Again, potentially one of the greatest points in all of Tolkien lore, the fall of Numenor, and we're wasting time. We're wasting time with some terrible side story of the Harfoots discovering that their families all separated and went on different journeys. Oh my word. Wow. Okay, great. And it's not even dramatic either. There's not even any dramatic tension. There's not even any dramatic sort of conundrum or worry or mystery. It's just there in black and white. Yeah, some of your people went that way, we stayed here. What more do you want from me? It's basic. It's very basic. Really, really basic. And then we have the whole situation with Sauron himself. We don't see anything of Sauron in this episode. We just get a sense that Sauron is the one that's responsible for destroying a bridge when Elrond thinks it's lightning. Well done, Elrond. Have you ever seen bloody lightning, mate? Jesus Christ. But there you go. It's another episode of waffling. It's another episode of dribble for me. And I pretty much watch this as a side. I don't hold any great sort of longing to see the next episode. It comes, I watch it, and then I go and do something else and think about it for a couple of days, which is why these reviews become late, because I'm trying to find some semblance of connectivity for me. I'm trying to find some semblance of joy, trying to find some semblance of, wanting from this show where I can enjoy it. But at the moment, there is nothing. I don't doubt we're going to get some great, battles. I say great, big battles. I don't doubt we're going to get some explosive battles, some potentially shocking scenes. But again, it's visuals and spectacle mean nothing if the groundwork isn't there. If the meat isn't on the bone, then, why would I care about you shouting and screaming and throwing swords at people and everything like that? We had this with final season of Game of Thrones. The battles meant nothing because the story underneath fell apart, and we ended up picking them apart. The battle of bloody whatever the fucking castle is. I can't remember the bloody castles anymore because I've completely detached from Game of Thrones. Winterfell, the Battle of Winterfell, dribble. Who puts catapults in front of their fucking walls? Oh my word! And that's the kind of thing I do. When I see something that doesn't sit right, I end up looking at everything under a microscope, because I go back and I think, well, why didn't that work? Why didn't that make sense? Oh, it's because of that. Oh no, there's also that. Oh, it's a me problem. But there you go. That is, I barely talked about the episode itself, but fundamentally to say that it's a walking simulator episode with action at the end. Ents come, the orcs find the company of elves. Galadriel beats them, and Isildur and that elf, though I've got no idea what his name is, fall into some mud, and then their betrayal lady helps them. Oh, okay. Right, cool. Just people walking places, not using appropriate modes of transport when available to them. That's the episode. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, which you probably didn't, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below about the Rings of Power. How does it feel for you? What are your thoughts on this series so far? What are your hopes and dreams and fears? Do you crave for better writing? Do you crave for better story? Let me know. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.